Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Larry Rhodes.
And I am Johannes. And we want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find two organizations, of which I know, for free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for free-thinking atheists and agnostics and people curious about living a life free of supernatural beliefs.
There is another group or two, one called Skeptics. I'm not sure what the third one is, or fourth one.
This is a show put on by two of those groups. There are separate.
True. This is a call-in show. However, we only have one phone line. If you can't get through, we invite you to email questions to us live at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun meetup, often at a bar or eatery. Sometimes we even do karaoke. That's true, actually. I would avoid those, though, because I'm normally at those. Tonight's meetup is at Barley's in the Old City. It's for happy hour tonight after the show. Actually, it starts 30 minutes into the show. We have a timing thing. Feel free to join us tonight at Barley's in the Old City after the show or at any time from 5:30 on for food, drink, and conversation. Also, Friday, we will meet up at either Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market, weather
permitting.
Yeah, weather dependent, I guess. To find us, look for the silver-jacketed copy of The God Delusion. You can see it, well, no, there. Anyway, look for the silver-jacketed copy of The God Delusion standing upright on the table. And as Matt Dillahunty at the Atheist Experience says, everyone is welcome to visit our happy hour for food, drink, and conversation, but if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please keep it to yourself.
The monthly activities of the Rationalists of East Tennessee are on the first and third Sunday mornings. They're usually lectures, and they have a lively roundtable discussion. The second Sunday is usually a book club. The April book, The Fair Society, The Science of Human Nature and the Pursuit of Social Justice by Peter Corning was the one last week. The fourth Sunday is the Reflections Gathering, a potluck afternoon gathering at one of the members' homes.
Visit our websites for additional monthly program details, including times and locations. But first, we have news. We don't have much in the news this segment. We're really going to be talking just a little bit about the Reason Rally still. If you want to take it from there. No problem. As reported last week, March 24th saw tens of thousands of atheists descending on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. for the Reason Rally. Several ASK and RET members made the pilgrimage, as it were. We reported on some of the people we met and some of the memorable guest speakers, but not all.
Right. Adam Savage from the popular TV show Mythbusters spoke. To see his speech, go to YouTube and search for Adam Savage at the Reason Rally.
We would like to read to you his powerful concluding words.
Right. He said, I have concluded through careful empirical analysis and much thought that somebody is looking out for me, keeping track of the things that I have done and forgiving me when I do less than I ought.
Giving me strength to shoot for more than I think I'm capable of doing. I believe they know everything that I do and think, and they still love me.
And I've concluded after careful consideration that this person keeping score is me. But I've concluded after careful consideration that it is me, and only me.
On to the show. Well, this is the show.
Right.
News, not news as a segment. Yeah.
What's today's show about?
Today's show is about evolution. You see the question at the bottom of the screen, was Darwin wrong? The simple and accurate answer is no. No, he is not. He was not wrong. So, yeah.
Shall we go into the ending now?
Let's just move on. No, was Darwin wrong? No. No, Darwin is not wrong. Feel free to call in. The number is sitting there on your screen. Feel free to call in and ask questions. You can ask questions of a real live evolutionary biologist. That's me. You can ask me all manner of things. I might or might not have the answer, but odds on I at least have something to tell you.
And for maybe the vision impaired, the number is 865-215-2288.
All right. Well, starting off, Evolution is both more and less than what many religious types, particularly Southern Protestants, have been led to believe. An elegantly simple explanation of the diversity of life is now seen by many as a corrupting influence that inadequately explains the origin and meaning of life. This is, unfortunately, what happens when a scientific principle becomes a lightning rod for religious and political grandstanding. Today, we're going to be clarifying what evolution is and isn't, answering some common questions, and taking your questions in the form of calls, as mentioned earlier. Once again, the number is at the bottom of your screen, should you feel the need. I would like to remind you that you have 2 atheists and an evolutionary biologist to whom you may speak. If you've ever wanted your questions answered by a near expert, now is your chance.
That's the time.
All right. To clear things up, all right, there we go. To clear things up, neither of these things happened, but before any of that, we're going to answer a call.
Welcome to Freethought Forum. May we have a name or a nickname, please?
Yeah, Jerry.
I'm sorry?
Jerry.
Jerry? Welcome, Jerry. Did you have a question or a comment?
Oh, of course. You got was Darwin wrong? Absolutely.
And your proof for that, or your evidence for that?
Your proof that he was right. Let me ask you for your proof.
The
proof.
The ascent of man.
The proof will be presented throughout the show. We have an informative slideshow on evolution, and of course my narration. There is overwhelming evidence.
So
do you have something for us?
Everything was wrong. What he came up with, everything was wrong.
Well, can you name one thing and then give us some reason why it was wrong?
Well, doesn't Darwin come up with a thing called the Piltdown Man?
No, he did not.
No.
Doesn't he believe in evolution?
He brought about the theory of natural selection. A lot of people believed in evolution before Darwin lived.
However, it was not through the mechanism of natural selection. There is a form of evolution called Lamarckian evolution that has been proven experimentally to be patently false. Acquired characteristics in an organism are not passed on to offspring through the gametes.
But artificial evolution has been around for selection. Has been around for hundreds of years before Darwin even lived.
Yes, dogs are an excellent example of
horses, pigeons.
Whereby man.
How old would our world be according to Darwin?
Darwin, actually, this is an excellent point. Darwin is not a geologist. He studied the strata of the Earth and concluded that the Earth had to be very, very old. Darwin, however, is not a geologist, nor is he a cosmologist. As best as we understand carbon dating, age of the universe, information from the solar system, the Earth is approximately 4.5 billion with a B years old. Life on this planet, according to the earliest fossil we could find, give or take, is around 3.8 billion years old.
Now
Darwin didn't do these.
Right. These are how the sciences work together. You can't have one field of science over here like geology or astronomy or even evolution working in separate areas, not communicating. They have to come to some consensus on the things that they agree on.
Assuming that the lifespan of a person is like 70 years old, in about 4,000 years, you would have about 27,000 people.
Okay, well, when was the Great Flood? How long ago was
I'm done with this. We are not discussing population statistics or dynamics. That's not 27,000 people.
Well, let's just say that the Great Flood was 600 years ago or even 6,000 years ago. I mean, the Bible puts the age of humanity much less than the age of the very earth. But anyway, go ahead and
This
start.
is not a discussion of population dynamics, how many people we're going to have, or where mankind is going. Evolution does not answer the question of from whence did life come. That's a question for biochemists and people who specialize in abiogenesis. That is not a question for evolutionary biologists.
Right.
We determine the the how, I guess, of how organisms diversify and speciate.
Well, what's the dictionary definition of evolution? Change of allele frequency in a population over time?
That's actually more, that's actually more complicated than you would believe. There are many mechanisms through which this happens, but we're getting to this. We're getting to this. We have a whole slideshow. Moving on. Slide 2. All right. Just to clear up everything, neither of these things presented in the slides that you can't see happened. And I guess the classic slide, the ascent of man, man coming from the chimpanzee. Man is related to the chimpanzee. We have a common ancestor, approximately 4 to 9 million years ago was when our common ancestor lived. Chimpanzees are, however, not our great-grandfathers or our uncles, so to speak. They're more like cousins. We did not evolve from the chimp. The chimp is not a primitive form of man. We are related, though. All right. Anyway, essentially, to explain the origin of man and the evolution of life, the correct answer, the accurate answer, like almost all truly complete and accurate explanations, is both elegant in principle and complex in practice. If we believed in the devil, he would be in the details.
Right. Many people may look at this bottom slide here and think that, that's exactly what did happen. He's saying that it's wrong in that it doesn't represent the complexity of the actual evolutionary process for man. It's not a straight line. It's not linear. About 3 million years ago, there were actually 4 or 5 hominoid species in the world. There are an awful lot of different species that lived at different times, but at one time there were several at one time.
We coexisted with Neanderthal.
We did. And that was only 30,000 years ago.
Not particularly long.
Yeah.
All right. A lot of religious types like to get into the why. Why ad nauseum? You've seen, everyone's dealt with toddlers. Why? Well, that is part of the scientific process, but evolution, there is a point at which evolutionary biology ends as far as the whys go. It ends at how did life begin? How did life originate? That's where our whys end. We don't specialize in that. Evolution does not deal in the beginning of life. That's not it. Once the first cell exists, then we pick up the torch and run with it. Prior to that, that's not something with which Darwin dealt. Darwin at no point speculated as to the ultimate origin of life. And
there are people that do.
Oh, yes, absolutely. There are many that do, but they are not classified as evolutionary biologists.
Right.
That is a question for someone else entirely.
And what's the name of that field?
The name of the theory is abiogenesis. Typically, you would be dealing with a biochemist or a molecular biologist of some stripe or another when dealing with that. That's a much more complicated topic that requires an understanding of physics and chemistry, and it's well beyond the scope of a call-in show with an hour to talk. Anyway, the first step to answering the why question is to question how evolution explains the origins of life itself. Again, evolution does not explain the origin of life. I can't stress that enough. Abiogenesis, of course, is what this is called, the theory of life arising from non-life, and it is not a self-arranging process, but
Since
anyway.
you're talking about the beginning of life, maybe you would like to talk about the middle image.
Oh, yes. It's Watson and Crick in our picture there.
Is that not Miller-Urey? Is that Watson and Crick?
That's Watson and Crick.
Okay.
Watson and Crick in the middle there, discussing the discussing the helical structure of DNA, showing it. They've built their nice big molecular model. And if you look at the image directly above my head, you'll see a little bit of abiogenesis, or a little bit of biology, or biochemistry for that matter. You see the lipid bilayer, which the nature of the phospholipids, the individual phospholipids that make up the lipid bilayer, you see above my head.
They may not actually see it. I've just been told that the video is frozen.
Oh my!
Going out. We hope that you can still hear us and that you'll stay with us, and they'll be able to fix the problem. Sorry, go ahead.
I understand. We're dealing with technical difficulties. No, the lipid bilayer, which encloses almost all cells, is the reason why it is arranged the way it is because of chemistry, a combination of chemistry and physics. They naturally align this way. Phospholipids exist in nature independent of life, just so everyone's aware of that anyway.
Some people might think of chemistry simulating life in crystals, the way that they align themselves and duplicate patterns, things like that. That could be the very beginning of the organic duplication of chemical processes, even before RNA or DNA came about.
Maybe. Definitely prions are a really interesting thing. The self-replicating folding crystalline proteins that get in the brain and cause those nasty spongiform encephalitis, and that's mad cow is a good example of that. But again, this is all very rather out there. We're sticking to basics here because we do not have an entire semester. It wouldn't fit in a semester, much less an hour. All right. However, there does exist compelling evidence for the process of abiogenesis. However, again, that's not the point of today's show. Next slide, please. Oh. All right. It's really amazing what a little change and a lot of time can do. While most mutations are in fact deleterious, meaning they harm the organism, most are also very minor. Frame shift, point mutations, as far as deletions, as far as errors in DNA replication go, or RNA,
or even viral
or RNA
insertions.
transcription. Yeah, there are errors. However, there's also mutation caused by stray radiation. There are plenty of causes for mutation, but rest assured it does happen. Again, while most mutations are deleterious, they're also minor. You must also be aware, though, that the addition and or accumulation of genetic material can be from any number of sources, like I mentioned, mutation. Interestingly enough, viral DNA is a major source of novel genetic material in modern humans. You might not believe it, but it's true. The viruses function by inserting DNA or RNA into your cells and allowing them to replicate. But we'll get right back to that. We have a caller.
Okay.
You're on the air, caller. Hello. May we have a name?
Hey, my name's Zach.
Hello, Zach. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm fantastic. I can't speak for Larry, though.
Great.
All right. Zach.
Yes.
You have a question. Let's hear it, man.
Okay. If evolution, if we developed from monkeys and came, and that's how the process started, then how come we don't see that kind of drastic change anymore? I mean, we see as far as we see adaptation, but we really don't see evolution anymore.
Oh, well, evolution, in a sense, is adaptation. What you have to understand is evolution is not a forward-looking process, nor is it a backward-looking process. It looks at what's happening immediately. The environment selects individuals with specific traits. It's hot outside. Those with less fur might suffer. Those with sweat glands, or those that produce a minuscule amount of sweat, have a cooling advantage over other organisms. So we're left with that. This works over a geological time scale. If you're talking about evolution, again, the accumulation of minor adaptations is readily visible in populations now. We can see it. And I think that's what you're referring to when you say adaptation.
He's also talking about why don't we see dramatic changes like we did? We never saw dramatic changes. Maybe you'd like to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
That's if you're looking back on time, and you can look back at millions of years and say this million-year period saw a lot of changes. The human species has only been around for 150,000 years. That's 15% of even 1 million years. We can't see that in a human lifetime, but we can see it in the fossil record and in the DNA record.
Now, if you're looking at different strata of the Earth and you're seeing fossils, naturally you will see rather dramatic change in a 10, 15-foot span. You'll see some wild things.
But that covers a lot of time.
Yes, exactly. But that covers an immense amount of time. Far, far more than even the entire length of time human civilization has existed.
I'd like to recommend that you go to an online site called talkorigins.org and do some reading there. It'll explain it pretty well.
Okay, and one more question if you got time?
No problem.
Okay, the biblical viewpoint of the Earth is around between 6,000 and 8,000 years old.
Uh-huh.
And I've heard theories that carbon dating is been proved wrong. Have you heard anything about that?
Well, you know, a lot of the criticism of carbon dating is about inaccuracy. We're talking inaccuracy of, again, give or take, a few 100,000 years. When you're dealing with geological timescales, you don't really need to be particularly accurate. Also, carbon dating is limited by the half-life of carbon. When we're, well, actually,
it's not the only dating process that we use. And some of the things that you may have heard in church or read out of any kind of religious magazine is the fact that they were using carbon dating on some seashells or something. And that it's not meant to be used on such a short-term a short span of time. How many different dating types of chemistry can we use or are available?
There are several. Not to mention there are also there's also astronomy from which we can draw. It's relatively predictable.
There are dozens of them, and usually the dating that they select is for the dating, the amount of time that they want to measure. One type of dating procedure wouldn't work on a certain type amount of time scale, so they have to match it to the type of or the amount of time that can be covered by that dating procedure.
He's absolutely right. It'd be like using calipers to judge the size of your sofa. You're using the inappropriate tool.
Or tree rings to discover when the life began. You can't do that. Again, Talk Origins has a lot of information like that, but really what you're talking about now is geology. I don't have a good off the top of my head site for that, but just do a search for ice ages, and that's one of the things that'll take you back in time and tell you how they determine different rates of decay in time. Yeah, things.
All righty. Well, I sure do appreciate you guys.
It was great talking to you, Zach. Thanks.
All right, bye-bye.
Goodbye. That's a good call. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Straightforward, good questions. With we like those.
Yeah.
We want more. Give us what we want.
We're here. Call us.
That's not a threat. It's a request. Viral DNA or RNA is actually a source of quite a bit of novel genetic material in modern humans. Quite a bit of what's wound around your histones came from one viral infection or another from way back in the day, or recently. Anyway, the accumulation of mutations is not the only means by which evolution happens. Though gradualism explains quite a bit, there is also punctuated equilibrium, which is one species may become many in a relatively short amount of time. In addition to that, there is geographic and non-geographic isolation that can lead species to inhabit different niches and eventually evolve into what would be classified as different species. Examples of this can be found in strangely enough, shrimps on either side of Costa Rica's coast. There are western shrimps, there are eastern shrimps, there are Pacific and Atlantic shrimp, which are actually kind of interesting, but they're clearly related. But again, the split. Anyway, all right. I'm finding a place here. All right. By the way, the process of geographic separation are known as both either allopatric or sympatric speciation, respectively. Allopatric being geographic. Given time, geology, the evolution of habitats themselves, in the sense that plant species, fungi, etc., that constitute an ecosystem or habitat will themselves evolve. And a large enough population, lots of really wild things can happen. You can see it in the picture actually behind us. You can see ground-dwelling geckos. Most geckos don't have eyelids. Some do. Those that live in, I guess, rocky or desert environments do have eyelids. They've all adapted really interesting mechanisms and means of dealing with their environment and the way that they live. An immense amount of diversity in a relatively small, in a single family. Another caller?
Welcome to Freethought Forum. May we have a name or nickname?
Hi, this is Ken.
Hello, Ken.
Did you have a question or a comment?
Cut me some slack as I'm a non-scientist wading through these topics here.
No problem.
Okay.
Number one, were you going to mention the pubic lice bit, or do you know what I'm talking about?
The fact that originally, as far as what is it? Sorry, that we have evidence for body lice, as in human body lice, not just pubic and or head lice, right?
Mm-hmm. Well,
and that
okay.
they're related to other primate species of lice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, apparently there was they sequenced them out, and I don't know if this is the correct concept, but I'm guessing that if you know one particular generation, you're able to work out the previous generation's gene sequence, because that seems to be what the whole theory is based on. And there is a difference, but they found a convergence 3.5 million years ago was the figure they used.
So the common ancestor for body lice is approximately 3.5. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
although they did differentiate between that, they said there was a special branch of pubic lice.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that.
That could make a degree of sense, but yeah, the idea that they have a common ancestor, as you said, about 3 million years ago, the idea that I'm guessing you're saying primate lice, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, that would make a great deal of sense. Yeah, keep going, man.
Okay, and my second is kind of a question. I'm coming from the concept of, as a former Christian, I, quote, thought I was studying all the arguments to negate these, but, once I became an atheist and started looking at it rationally and all, I came around. But anyway, how, as oxygen, percentage of oxygen in the atmosphere has decreased by about 2.5% over the past couple hundred years due to man, isn't it possible that the amount of carbon-14 was different at an earlier time, too, and that might throw the carbon-14 dating off? Although I think you might have answered that earlier with your talk about the scope of it.
Yeah, as far as concentrations of gases in the atmosphere, I'm not a climatologist. I'm not an expert on the atmosphere, but 2.5% is a massive difference in the amount of oxygen.
Not only that, but oxygen is a fairly heavy gas. It's not going to leave the Earth. It can't get the acceleration to leave the Earth's atmosphere. It's still got to be here somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as change in gas levels, I know we have the ice cores, which generally are only accurate to about 250, 300,000 years ago, is generally the limit of an ice core. You could find trace gases trapped in the water. It's been frozen in the different layers, and that's analyzed by mass spectroscopy, and from there you can determine, I guess, the composition of the atmosphere. But again, that only goes back so far. I cannot speak to the assertion that a few hundred years ago the percentage of oxygen was 2% higher, but to me that sounds like an immense, that really does not sound at all right. But
okay, again, heard off a television program, so.
Yeah, no, that doesn't sound at all right, but yeah, and just as an aside, as far as, I guess, seeing the light and being an atheist and believing in evolution, belief in evolution does not, Christianity does not preclude a belief in evolution. There are plenty of Christian sects that acknowledge the validity of Darwin's work and the modern synthesis, which is, I guess, the coming together of Mendelian genetics, phylogenetics, and everything else to, I guess, essentially build a more complete picture of evolutionary history. But being a Christian does not preclude belief in evolution. There really isn't a lot of conflict here. A belief in, I guess, the correct, as I would say it, a belief in evolution does not leave no room for God. I happen to be an atheist, and so does Larry, and we happen to be discussing evolution on the show because science is a topic that we, Atheist Society of Knoxville and Rationalists of East Tennessee, happen to enjoy. Mm-hmm. But by no means is evolution a strictly atheist thing. It's a science thing.
I might come out with you with a little bit different viewpoint on that. To me, the whole religious structure, it's a house of cards, and if one thing is wrong, well, there's a good chance an awful lot more of those particular beliefs are wrong. So
I could see that, but I do respect the fact that some, as a matter of fact, plenty of scientists, Mendel himself, where monks, monks are,
Crick.
yeah. Well, Monster Crick, but Mendel himself was
A monk one.
precisely. I mean, a lot of science has been done by the religious. That Newton was deeply religious, but again, that's nothing to do with evolution. But I can understand your belief in the House of Cards thing, and my, I guess, deconversion, if you will, followed a similar line of reasoning, but again, a belief in evolution and a belief in, I guess, the true age of the universe does not leave no room for God. We're not trying to convert you to deconvert you to atheism or anything. It's just we happen to be discussing science today. Not specifically to you, but just to any and all viewers. It's
Okay.
Yeah,
I enjoy the show. I'm a frequent caller, and I hope to call in the future. Thank you.
fantastic.
Okay, and don't forget, you can come down to the Barley's Tap Room Pizzeria after the show. We're there every Tuesday. Matter of fact, let's do a real quick mid-program break.
Yes.
And all I'll really do is mention our sponsors. This is a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. If you can drop the image down just a little bit, they can see the websites at the top. Do a search for Knoxville Atheists or the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by them and by individual contributions. Okay, you can go ahead.
All right. Back to evolution. Though mutation cannot spontaneously form a complex organ, as many would say, it's the blind watchmaker, the 747 assembled from a junkyard argument. Mutation does not spontaneously form complex organs or features. It does, however, lead to incremental changes that might just confer a selective advantage, and we're getting to that. Darwin's theory, Darwinian evolution, is based on gradual change. We're discussing what natural selection is specifically in this sense. Natural selection being the tendency of individuals within a species of one phenotype to be more prone to reproduce than individuals of another phenotype, dependent, of course, on environmental circumstances. In plain English, this means that certain organisms survive and pass on their genes based on the possession or absence of some trait or traits, while others do not pass on these genes. That is selection. The natural part is that the influences on selection are entirely naturalistic, without the influence of man or the supernatural. Artificial selection, of course, is breeding dogs, breeding horses, breeding a number of animals for desirable traits that we want. Strangely, many in the intelligent design camp accept natural selection as a process, and then go on to ask for how it accounts for the introduction of new traits, like the eye or the beak, or
even new species.
Exactly, the introduction of whole new things. They're not actually entirely all that new. Though natural selection alone does not account for this, mutation coupled with natural selection generally does. We'll explore this in further detail right now. The next question. For this specific example, we're going to go with the mollusk eye. There are lots and lots of examples. There's everything from the fingernails to the flagellar motor. There's plenty of examples of, I guess, natural selection and mutation bringing about the presence of really complex organs and traits in a species. But we're going with the mollusk eye.
You've got a good diagram up there now.
Oh yeah, we have an excellent diagram up here right now. You can see. There we go. You can see right there, the first one is
light sensitive.
Yeah, simple light sensitive cells, a simple layer of light sensitive cells.
Like a plant.
Almost. Yeah, no, they are quite light sensitive.
I mean, some plants will actually follow the sun as it goes across the sky.
But yes, the mollusk eye, we have examples from the very simple to the extraordinarily complex. At one end of the spectrum, we have planarian worm species, which have the simple, and depending on the species, you have everything from the simple light-sensitive cells, or simple single clusters of light-sensitive cells, to the concave cup kind of eye that you see in the second one, right?
Yeah.
No. There we go. All right. First, we have these flat photosensitive cells. The cells detect changes in light, but only in very vague terms. A slight mutation that affects the depth of these cells and you have yourself a directional sensitivity to changes in light.
Even that's a question that I would perceive coming from the audience. Why would this organism know that it needed to dimple its light-sensitive cells?
Doesn't need to know that. Evolution isn't a process that I'm personifying, I'm anthropomorphizing this a little bit, but evolution doesn't care what you need.
So
it really
some
doesn't.
plants or animals will actually cup through accident, through genetic mutation.
Precisely. Mutation can account for very minor changes, mind you, most mutations being deleterious, but some are in fact advantageous. A simple mutation towards, well, we'll get onto this later, but neoteny, the example of a human being able to process milk even a little bit longer, being able to produce lactase, can confer a selective advantage on that human, hence why many of us can drink milk.
So the organism with the second slide here would have a reproductive advantage over its fellow organisms.
Even a slight dip, a slight concavity to this ocular cup grants you a directional sensitivity to light, which is an advantage.
Or shadow.
Yeah, exactly.
If
being able to sense
predator.
Direction of it is immensely more useful than simply the presence or absence of light, which being able to detect the presence or absence of light is more useful than not.
Right.
So we're going in steps. People have said, what is the use of half a wing? What is the use of half an eye? This is it. But yes, some creatures survive and reproduce. This is not to say that all creatures without the fancy directionally photosensitive eye or ocular cup are unfit. Some creatures survive and reproduce just fine without the eye. Their descendants still happily exist as flatworms and some slugs or snails, sans the added development burden of a complicated light-sensing organ.
As long as the environment is conducive to that type of organism.
This gets to another common intelligent design creationist kind of question, which is if we came from more primitive forms, or why do those primitive forms still exist? Because they're perfectly capable of reproducing within their own environments. Right. The crocodile, the living fossil that is that are crocodilians, are an excellent example. They're fantastic ambush predators. They've evolved well into their niche, and they've been extraordinarily successful. There's no reason to change any. There's no reason for changing
allele.
There's no
advantage to changing their evolutionary niche in their environment.
Yes. So they seem perfectly.
Because the environment doesn't change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or they move with the environment.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So this explains the presence of, I guess, more primitive forms. Although, again, when we use primitive and advanced, mind you, these are very relative terms. Evolution is not a march towards complexity or intelligence. We have a caller. Hello, caller.
May we have a name or a nickname, please?
Brian?
Brian.
Brian.
Do you have a comment or question?
Yeah, I got just really one question.
Okay.
Do you have like the picture of the stages of eye complexity in the moles back behind you? Have either of you witnessed this evolution?
You don't have to see the evolution. You can actually go out into nature and find organisms with these different structures today.
No, I'm talking about the specific thing behind
Actually.
you. You actually witnessed that?
Yes. I have with mine own two eyes, witnessed. I didn't work with this lab, but I did witness the research, did witness this happening. It's not like you want the next day, but essentially it's a Myxococcus xanthus. I'm actually getting to Myxococcus to explain the origin of multicellular life, but it's in a bacteria species really common in the soil called Myxococcus xanthus. Typically their motility is facilitated by organelles called pilae. In many bacteria these are used for lateral gene transfer, but it was a knockout experiment done whereby the genes coding for the pilae were removed from Myxococcus xanthus, and they could no longer produce pilae for motility. Interestingly enough, they managed to facilitate motility through a new mechanism. Though it wasn't quite the pilae that it was before, after several million generations. They did eventually evolve motility again through a different mechanism. The need for motility, not the need necessarily, but the selective advantage of motility presented itself, or I guess existed, and those that were capable of limited movement eventually, over time, passed on their genes, changing the allele frequency within the species, not really the species, within the experimental group, and eventually resulting in motile bacteria where before there were no motile bacteria.
Well, let me speak to another part of what you said. Did we actually see it? Well, I didn't see it. But I can tell you that every day somebody, or pretty much every week, somebody in this world is being sent to their death by detectives who did not see the crime. People are being electrocuted or whatever and being killed by the government because the evidence was there. Scientists are the evidence, are the detectives of nature. That's what they do. Any other questions?
I'm just curious as I guess one of the problems I have is, okay, according to the Bible, these are people that had evidence of people like Jesus Christ that existed, and they use a book to tell their story, but then the scientists use their evidence to tell their part of what scientific theory is, and it's like, wouldn't we be on the same track?
I once had a nun.
Take a word by other people, because we personally weren't there. Like Charles Darwin, we never, none of us met Charles Darwin. We don't know what he actually saw.
I don't understand how you can say that the people who saw Jesus presented their evidence. We don't even know who wrote the Gospels. And there's no evidence.
Why would they lie? Why would they suddenly
Maybe they have. You want to go ahead and move on?
Yes, moving on. We appreciate your call.
Appreciate
Thank you, Brian. All right. Okay, so we're moving. Further, it isn't so much of a stretch that the concave photoreceptor-lined organ could form into a simple optic cup that's filled with water. Its function is similar to that of the pinhole camera, and it confers a distinct advantage over the previous iteration of our eye. The concave thing is now not turned into, but through selection, we eventually arrive at this cup. No, that's better. This cup that you see in the middle here, which is, I guess, a good example would be the eye of the nautilus, a very primitive, not mollusk, but a primitive cephalopod. Yes. Anyway, we need only look at the epicanthic fold case in point to see how changes in structure around the eye can be relatively easily facilitated by mutations or the presence or absence of a single gene. Fun fact, the epicanthic fold, along with the ability to process lactase, are examples of neoteny, in which the retention of infant or juvenile features persist into adulthood. But that's a different story. Do we have a call?
Yes, we do.
We do. We're taking our caller.
Welcome to Freethought Forum. May we have a name or nickname? You're on the air.
Oh, hey, this is Jeff. How you fellas doing?
Doing fine.
Jeff, you said?
Enjoy your program. This is my probably third, fourth, or fifth time to catch you guys on the air.
Okay, cool.
And I find it just interesting. We're I guess, are polar opposites in where our beliefs are, but I always enjoy intelligent conversation, and you guys certainly provide that.
Well, thank you.
Now, the point I guess that I would make, and probably do it in a poor manner, is that I don't discount math and science. In fact, it seems like we do too much of that. Math and science is what it is. I mean, we learn more and more, and what we understand yesterday, tomorrow we might feel different about, but that's important. And it seems like evolution is something that we don't need to be arguing about. Did this happen? We might not have all the details right, but that seems to be pretty close to an absolute sort of truth.
Okay.
But I don't think I don't necessarily think that the existence of evolution and the existence of a entity that created everything, whatever you want to call this entity, have to be at odds. I don't feel like, and in fact, it seems with my very poor base of scientific knowledge, it seems like the absolutely incredible sequence of events and circumstances that would have to happen for us to end up with planet Earth and humans running around and animals running around and plants growing are so monumental. The odds of all these dominoes falling exactly in the right sequence at the right time in the right circumstances, it almost seems to me to the overwhelming science doesn't reduce my faith in some sort of creator. It increases my faith that there had to be something behind this.
Well, if I may,
yes.
You're saying that the monumental complexity of our systems requires somebody to have made it, some entity of some kind, and that what Richard Dawkins said, and I happen to agree, is that something that would make something that could make something that complex would have to be even more complex than its creation. Where did that person come from, or entity? How was that created?
And I would take that as further, not proof, but would further my belief in there having to be a massively intelligent, complex creator.
Well, that's what I was just asking. Where did that massively complex creator come from then?
Well, here's where...
Aren't you getting into an infinite regress?
This would probably be seen as a cop-out, but here is how I wrap things up in a tiny little knot and bow in my mind. If you could understand God, he really wouldn't be God. But it just seems like, but it seems like for everything to work out as it has, it would be, and I've read this somewhere, it would be like a tornado blowing through a junkyard, and then when it moved out, you've got a 747 that operates.
If you don't mind, I'd like to play a little bit of peacemaker here.
Yeah.
The argument from irreducible complexity, the idea of climbing Mount Improbable, we're finding more and more planets around, I think it's G-sequence stars, like our sun, all the time. Earth is not particularly unique. Now, life-wise, we don't know, but granted, getting there is going to be a little hard. The universe is a very big place, though. The process that led to us might be extraordinary, but it might not be all that rare. Although it could well be rare. We have no idea. We don't have starships to get there to find out, so we don't really have a very big sample size.
Right.
But I think I get what you're saying in the sense that evolutionary biology, in the sense that life began with a single cell, man evolved from a common ancestor, man evolved from a primate. We are primates, we are animals, we were not created. I think we agree on those points, and although you attribute it to a creator, and I don't necessarily think that it must be attributed to a creator, but I like the idea that evolution is not necessarily in any way, shape, or form in conflict with religion. As I stated earlier in the show, we happen to be talking about evolution because RET and ASK enjoy science, and we decided to do a science show instead of, I guess, a purely philosophical show for a day.
And you guys are very, I really appreciate your basis of knowledge and where you're coming from. Let me ask a quick question.
Well, let me address a previous statement you did before you get into another question. Yeah. The analogy of a tornado blowing through a junkyard and creating a 747 is not analogous to evolution at all. The evolution is based on self-replicating DNA, self-replicating organisms who can pass down their genes and their traits through time and have change and selective pressures from the natural world to help form that organism over the course of many, many billions of years.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And actually, I wasn't referring just to evolution. It's our exact distance from the sun, the exact oxygen levels. I mean, there's so many things that are necessary for life. So
yeah, you're talking a climbing Mount Improbable, as Dawkins put it, kind of scenario. And I understand completely. You're not questioning evolution, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And I guess the answer is different for some. Some of us prefer to go with the best cosmology we have and try not to assume that it all does relate to a biblical deity, because to many of us, atheists included, I'm going to say this, and I mean no offense by it, to atheists in general, it seems rather absurd that it must lead to one specific Bronze Age myth or any myth from any age. It doesn't really seem to make a lot of sense. It seems absurd. However, to those with faith, so long as you do understand and recognize the science, I frankly don't have much of a problem with it. Primarily the reason why I came on today is because I have a problem with people preaching things that are strictly counterfactual.
And I agree. That's sad. That's sad.
And so that's where we find ourselves today.
Yeah. My last question, just real quick, and not a trick question. Nothing. I'm not springing something on you. Would you, with all your reasoned thought, would you say there is some chance, a 1%, a 0.5%, a 2%, whatever it would be, that this was a creator-based? Would you have, in your open thoughts and your open thinking, with all your study, it doesn't seem like we have the absolutes. Would you agree, or with your opinion, is there something in your mind? Is there a small percentage?
Are you addressing both of us, each of us?
Yeah, either one. I'm just curious. Either one.
Okay, atheism comes down to belief. It doesn't come down to any statement about a physical nature of the universe. I don't believe there's God. I don't know that there's not a God. There may be a 1% chance that there's some kind of creator out there. And even Richard Dawkins said on a scale of 7.0, he was a 6.9. So we don't
to explain the Dawkins scale, 1 being absolute believer, 7 being absolute believer in lack of gods, 1 being absolute believer in a god. Essentially, if you call yourself an atheist, all atheists are to an extent, or not all, but most atheists are to an extent agnostics. Were compelling evidence, and I mean truly very compelling evidence for a God presented, then of course it would be believed, because in general most atheists are, and there's a reason why the rationalists have chosen their name, rationalists.
Yeah. I am an agnostic atheist.
I appreciate your program, and obviously for me, I had 200 and some other choices on Comcast, so I enjoy watching your program.
Okay.
So.
Thank you for choosing us, sir.
And don't forget that you can come down to the Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria after the show. We're more than happy to sit around and discuss all of this stuff. This is a very interesting
topic. Goes best with beer, actually.
Yes. Beer.
Moderate amounts of beer. Moderate amounts. Anyway. Back to the eye. Speaking of the 747, we don't have the 747 from nothing. This did not come from nothing. This is a very this is not a random process, but we're getting to that.
There are random elements.
Yes, exactly.
But the process itself, natural selection, is far from random.
Absolutely. So we're going to skip on from this. We're running short on time. None of this is an accident. I should make very clear. Eyes, flagella, other advanced structures do not simply form by accident. The genes that give rise to primitive beginnings of these characteristics are in fact chance mutations, but the end results are far from random. Moving on, I might give you a mighty mound of Myxococcus xanthus. I mentioned it earlier. It is a cooperative colonizing bacteria species that is known for arranging its structures in accordance with environmental cues. This simple and very common soil bacteria is of great interest to evolutionary biologists for a number of reasons, not the least of which being the genetically encoded responses to environmental cues like lack of nutrients, lack of water, low temperatures, etc. But we have a caller.
Welcome to Freethought Forum. We have about 4 minutes left, of which we can use 3. Do you have a quick question or comment?
I do have a quick question about evolution.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, basically, based on the theory of evolution, everything evolves, so nothing really stays the same. I guess I have a question to evolutionists. Some of the creatures that were thought extinct, there are different species like the coelacanth fish, they were thought extinct, and they were dated back 40 million years ago. But then they do find them that they're still alive.
There are quite a few species.
So how do you explain a fossil that was thought extinct because it evolved and then it's still alive?
Persistent change. I understand absolutely. How do we explain the living fossils? Persistent change in an organism, like the human immune system is an excellent example, is I term by Red Queen hypothesis. You run at full speed to stay in place because the environment itself is very dangerous and highly selective. In this case, selective pressure on the human immune system being pathogens, viruses, bacteria. But as far as the living fossils, this was addressed earlier in the show actually, there are plenty of organisms that happen to live in a niche in which selection is not particularly strong on them.
Like sponges or jellyfish?
There isn't particularly a lot of pressure. Alligators are another excellent example. I guess crocodilians in general, girals, alligators, caimans, crocodiles.
These are literally organisms from the dawn of life. The sponges and jellyfish,
multicellular life.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, what we're getting to the idea is that they happen to be very, I guess, happy where they are right now. They're perfectly well adapted. The crocodilians are perfectly well adapted ambush predators. The coelacanth is a heavily armored fish with its nice thick keratin scales. It seems to do well enough in its deep sea environment, coming up at night to hunt and gather food. It seems to do well enough on its own. Selective pressure against it is not particularly hot and heavy.
Right.
Contrast this with, case in point, the Great Rift Lakes in Africa, which are hotbeds of evolution among cichlid species. There's immense selective pressure. There's quite a bit of competition within a given niche. And so there's quite a bit of speciation, and there's quite a bit of change in allele frequency in these species.
All right, some environments have a lot of pressure to change, like the ones he was talking about. Other environments have a lot of pressure not to change, because the environments themselves don't change. The organism isn't required to change.
Right, well, this specifically actually is on the south coast of Africa, which I would think is a highly pressured situation where they would have to evolve to adapt. But it's just
the ocean is not the land.
They're not adapted or evolved.
No, especially when they live deep in the ocean. We're going to have to hang up on you. I'm sorry. We've got to close. We have 1 minute left in the show.
Yep, we are not ichthyologists. Well,
Right.
I studied it, but I'm not an ichthyologist. But again, before making, I guess, taking a statement on faith, look into the realities of it. Read into it quite a bit. I'm sorry we couldn't have reached everything in our planned show, but we did appreciate your calls. We would appreciate them in the future. Please feel free to show up at Barley's in the Old City.
All right. We welcome all atheists and atheist-friendly people, agnostics or freethinkers. This has been Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. You can give us feedback. You leave us voicemail at 865-272-9060, or send us email at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com. We're on every Tuesday from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock, and you can watch us on ctvknox.org. I'd like to send our thanks to Sam and Jonas for